Hello and welcome into another episode of Lessons in Product Management. I'm your host, John Fontenot, and on today's episode, we're going to talk about how to up-level your PM career with Shobhit Chugh. Shobhit Chugh is a former Google PM and the founder of Intentional Product Manager, and he's going to share practical strategies for moving beyond execution and becoming a standout product leader, even when you don't have formal authority or even a supportive manager. So some of the things you're going to hear today on this episode is things like don't mistake productivity for progress, why influence is more important than delegation, how making the strategic urgent is something that is a key skill in shaping the type of work that you need to do in your PM career, how to think in terms of leverage, avoiding common mindset traps, developing an angle of mastery, and how to build your personal and professional brand in the product space to become the obvious hire, and how to position yourself in the market to be that obvious hire. This was such a fun conversation. We covered a lot of ground in a half hour, and I'm really excited to dive in. So with that, here's the conversation with Shobhit. Hey Shobhit, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, John, thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited for the conversation, and I know the listeners will be too. So before we dive in, for probably the small percentage of listeners who haven't seen you or heard from you on the different social channels or on YouTube, could you give a brief introduction of yourself, what you're doing today, and maybe kind of like how you got into what you're doing with the Intentional Product Manager?
Absolutely. So I'm the founder, CEO of Intentional Product Manager. Our main goal here is to coach product managers to get to the next level in their career. Ultimately, I look at it as, can we help them reach their potential? So I've been doing this for the past 5 years. Before that, I was a product manager at Google. I went through some career challenges prior to Google where I just felt I didn't have the right guidance and coaching available. So when I somehow pieced it together, I wanted to share that. And then that got me onto a side project, as many of these things are, ultimately ended up being my full-time gig. So
Yeah,
that's how I got here.
I love that. I was curious because I saw you kind of had a consulting background, and then you did some product consulting, and then got into product management. Spent time at Google, so I was curious what that origin story was. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. I mean, just like many origin stories, it's all rooted in some sort of failure, some sort of setback that got me here.
Yep, well, the pain that we experience kind of in our own lives, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's awesome. So let's dive in. For the PM that's listening, that maybe is kind of in the spot that you were in, or maybe they don't have the best coaching. Maybe the product leader they have got promoted because they were great at execution, but they're not like the ideal product leader to help grow others' careers. How how do you start to grow your career when you feel like you're buried in execution and you don't know what that next step is for you?
Look, I went through that. In fact, like the feedback I got from my manager at the end of the year was, "Hey, you were a great soldier, not a great general." And I was like, "Wait, what does that mean?" And then, like, eventually, as I overcame the shock of hearing that and thought I was doing everything, um, I realized that I'd really missed the boat on doing so many different things that um, I just was not sure what I would be known for. And really, what I encourage product managers to do is, first of all, you need to not equate productivity with progress because you might be headed in the wrong direction. But you almost have to do an Amazon style press release. You know how we do it for products, where even before you start building a product, you write the press release. How would you present it to the world? You have to do the same for your contributions over the course of 6 months, your next promotion cycle. Basically, what do you want to be known for? And once you get clear on those and you get some feedback on that, then you can start to understand, hey, here's all the like 100 things I'm doing that are not aligned in that direction. And here's the 10 things that are. Now, in an ideal world, you'll be like, cool, I'll do only those 10 and I can drop those 100 things. But that's just not how real life works because, you're doing those things and they're essential for your team. So I think that's where a lot of influence skills come in, where you need to now figure out who will be willing to do those things. Actually, first you need to figure out whether those things should be done in the first place or not, or they're just busy work. But then who else would be willing to and sometimes even want to do those things and start to move those off your plate? So I'm avoiding the word delegate here. That's what people say, hey, just delegate. But as a product manager, you don't have anyone reporting to you. So it's not that you're like, hey, you go do this and my word is final. So you have to figure out, does someone actually benefit from taking over that role? So for example, one of the projects I was working on, we were working on a new SDK, new software development kit. We have to write all these APIs. The PRD is going to have a bunch of API specs and whatnot. And I was like, me doing this, it's a waste of companies' resources. I'm not very good at it. I'm not the best person. Maybe somebody else wants to do it. So I just asked my team. And I figured out this one person who is an awesome engineer, very customer focused, and has ambitions of becoming a product manager themselves, or maybe a technical manager. So they were like, cool, I want to do it because that gets them that next step going. And as product managers, like this is a profession where people want to enter in. So they might want to help you out as a way of them getting experience. And so that enabled me to take like all that stuff off my plate. This person did like such an amazing job that I would never be able to do that. And it actually helped them get promoted next time. And now they're still working. I think when I left, they were still really transitioning into product, but like it benefited both of us. So I think
Yeah.
it's a combination of that sense of clarity plus a sense of influence and almost a sense of belief that while something might be hard work for you and maybe doesn't seem very useful, it actually might be something that somebody else really wants to do. So
Yeah.
that is the thing I encourage people to do is to influence your way out of it. There's one more aspect though, which I want to address here. So cool, like even with all of this done, it sounds great. And people tell you work on the important stuff, not the urgent stuff. Reality of life is the urgent stuff always wins. Just like we are hardwired because it generates certain primal emotions of fear and whatnot amongst us, and even obligation to others. And as humans, we want to like go and do that first. So then what do? You're stuck. No, what you also have to do is make the important stuff urgent. So you have to create urgency for that. And I don't mean like, motivate yourself and inspire yourself to have urgency. No, like you go and set some public deadlines. You go and tell your manager, hey, I'm working on this strategy. How about I present something to you next Thursday? Okay, sounds great. Awesome. Meeting set, that's your deadline. That will act as a motivator to you. But that also acts as a motivator for others in the sense of, you know, I don't know, John, if you've ever in an organization set up a, do not schedule block on your calendar, and
All the time.
people are booked over it all the time anyway. So that happens all the time. So the way to get around is say, oh, sorry, I can't meet at this time because I have a presentation to my manager at this on this date, so I have to prep for it.
Yeah.
And now they're like, oh, okay, we get it. It's an urgent thing coming up. We'll let you go. So that's another very important thing for people to get out of that execution mode and starting to find the time to becoming more strategic.
I love that. So I want to go back to some of the feedback that you got from your manager about being a soldier versus a general, and
Yeah.
then you kind of talked about the things that are important versus the things that maybe you could delegate that are kind of not the best use of your time and you as a resource. What are some of those things? Because I can imagine the listeners like hearing that are like, okay, I want to
Yeah.
make sure I'm doing the right things. What are some examples of things that I could be doing that are most impactful or strategic as a product manager?
Yeah. Some highly technical stuff like engineering decisions, architecture decisions. If you stuff like that, or um, communication, I know people would be like, oh, communication's a core job, but like, status reports and stuff like that, which even like testing the product and things like that, it's basically everything that's uh, in some sense present tense, needs to be done for something now, and small scale versus large scale. That's how I look at it.
Mm,
Those are the kind of things that potentially somebody else on the team really wants to do and would be very helpful. While future tense, forward thinking, and high scale, so like you're working on the roadmap for a huge bunch of things. Like those are things that you really should be focused on. Another one would be like resolving issues in the product and helping somebody troubleshoot and stuff like that.
yeah,
Not very,
that,
very helpful.
that sounds like it jives really well with a way that I've kind of thought about my role in product management is the like the word I go back to is leverage, right?
Hmm.
Like what can I be doing that creates the most leverage for my
Yeah,
product, my team, my company? And it
yeah,
sounds like that's kind of where you're at too, right?
totally. I refer to Shreyas Doshi coined this. He has a L and O framework.
Mm,
Uh, L is the leverage, exactly what you mentioned, 10x task, and it's like 1x. And O, I don't know what it stands for, but it's basically less than 1x. It's like you're
yeah,
you're spending time, but you're not getting enough output out of it.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. No, that's great. Kind of going along the lines of like leverage and like exponential impact. What are some of those things that make PMs stand out that you don't see enough PMs doing, or maybe they just aren't aware of that they should be doing it, right?
So some of the things that helps PM stand out. I'll talk about internal and then I'll talk about external.
Hmm,
So on the internal thing is actually regular. I'll say three things. First one seems obvious, but really getting to know your customer and having a cadence for that. Many people do it in phases where they're like, cool, we're going through a research discovery phase for now. So we'll do this. And then for months, they never talk to customers. One thing that my group did that really helped out is we just set up a customer hour. Every week, some customer is going to come talk to us. um, we're going to do some sort of interview at a defined time. Now it was up to me and my UX team to figure out who that customer is and whatnot. And of course, we'll move that hour to a different time to suit the customer. But making a habit out of that is one of the most leverageable things you can do. Second is alignment and regular communication about the long term. You know, why are we doing this? What's the next frontier, if you will, for this product? And because you are a product manager and you're like often thinking about this, there tends to be an assumption that everybody else is thinking about it. Well, they've forgotten. Like every 3 months, I would repeat the same presentation with some changes to my team. And every time they would be like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I'm like, cool, I said the exact same thing 3 months ago, but doesn't matter because they're not thinking about it. And, connecting them to the higher purpose of the product is just value for everyone. And then last but not least is communicating out. or building those relationships with stakeholders, with your manager, with skip level. Um, in some sense, you are selling the value of your work, not directly, but indirectly through the vision and through all these conversations. Um, and people sometimes think that's politics. I don't like that. But that's just a different negative framing of the same thing. Another way is to think about it as raising awareness for the good work that you're already doing, raising awareness for the learning your team has. Ultimately, everybody makes better decisions if they have awareness of the good work that's going on. So I think that's the highly leverageable thing that people do. Like, even things like I know I poo-pooed on status updates a little earlier, but if you do it in a way such that people get value about it, it's not just, hey, we moved this, like there's learnings, there's changes in directions that you're communicating the rationale. People really love it. And they might not respond to you real time, but I've done experiments where I would just stop sending that for a week or two. And then people would reach out and they'll be like, I haven't seen that for a while. So I'm like, oh, so you were paying attention. Okay, cool. I'm going to do this. I'm going to absolutely do that.
Nice.
So I think that's internally. And then somewhat externally is one, like continuously thinking about your career from a broader perspective and make sure you're going in the right direction while at that company, and having a sense of when you should look for something beyond. But then I think in today's market, building a brand and a reputation for yourself is getting quite critical. Whether that's posting on LinkedIn or whatnot, I just think it's a must-do activity, which several people are not yet doing. I know most people are not yet doing. I think that's a highly leveraged activity that people miss out on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I want to go to your first point about customer touch points because I hear PMs all the time talk about the pain of working with stakeholders and having stakeholder driven roadmaps, especially in B2B. And
Yeah,
one of the things that resonated was like when you develop those customer touch points, it develops your point of view and
yeah,
perspective, but also
100%.
data, even if it's anecdotally.
Yeah,
It gives you some, going back to the word leverage, to be able to share a counterpoint
yeah.
to what the stakeholders are trying to push.
I mean, I don't know if you've been in such a conversation where like everybody's like, "Oh, this is what we should do. This is what we should do," and somebody walks in and says, "Oh, I spoke to 7 customers, and this is what I found," and everybody just shuts up because they're like, "Okay, this person actually spoke to the customers." So
Yep, 100%. No,
yeah.
it definitely helps. So for the PMs that are like kind of in maybe feeling stuck or maybe kind of you know wondering whether they can actually do some of these things that you're suggesting in their
Mm.
their day to day, what are some of the mindset traps that you've seen PMs fall into, and how do you suggest they overcome those?
Um, uh, I I guess the biggest mind trap is just assuming because something is not being done today, it's been tried and proven wrong otherwise. And and part of it comes with obstacles that do not exist. So a conversation I had with somebody, I won't name the company or the person, but they were just like, wait, they were like, oh yeah, so but we can't talk to customers directly. We have to go through all these different layers to get approval. And I was like, why? I haven't seen any objections ever. Okay, you need this one document for them to sign and it's done. And they were like, really? We can do that? And it was just purely an assumption. Somebody said something in passing and they don't question, really, is that a blocker for something like that? So I think that's one huge category of like uh, assumptions made on very limited amount of data. But then there's also the sense of like one of the mind traps people really get into is overwhelm. It's overwhelmed with I have so much to do right now. I don't have time to think about strategy and whatnot. And it's really more emotion driven rather than facts driven. Like if they really took the time to log their time and figure out where they're spending time and what they can do, um, most people find a way. I would say 99% of people find a way, but it's more that the sense of busyness traps us into this thinking of, I just don't have any time. There's absolutely no way I can go do this. So that's where actually having somebody to just question, it could be a coach, could be a mentor, could be even a friend to like question some of these assumptions are is super duper helpful.
Yeah. And I found that like just a little bit of creativity helps too, right? Like in my first PM job, I ran into that same feedback where it
Yeah.
was we were primarily partner channel driven. So the end customer and end user of the product was a layer removed from
Yeah.
us. And they were like, yeah, you can't talk to the customer directly. You have to talk to the channel partner. But we had an idea board that the end customers could submit ideas to. And so we were able to leverage that to say, to go back to the channel partner and say, hey, they were talking about this problem. Do you know what they're talking about? Can you give us more information? And when they couldn't give it to us, we were able to say, well, can we get them on the phone so they can help
Yeah.
explain it a little better? And it was
Great
just
point.
a creative way to kind of reframe how we tackle that customer feedback problem.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned something really interesting, and it's like part of the creativity comes from solving this problem from the energy of the solution, not from the energy of the problem. So when you're trapped in the problem, you're really trapped. And so you have to like almost assume, yes, there is a way I can solve it. And then start to get creative, as you mentioned, John, solve things makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. Cool. So with a PM who maybe is looking to make a transition, whether it's internally or to your point earlier, maybe they don't see a path where they're at and they're starting to look at other opportunities. Are there ways that you've seen PMs, even in this market, as tough as it is, kind of position themselves as the obvious hire?
Yeah, a lot, and like pretty much you have to do that to land a role. I mean, maybe not any role, but anything that's a step above where you are or in the direction of where you want to go. Because again, I see a lot of numbers. I don't know how many of these are real. Last one I saw was that there's 37 PMs for every one job that's open. I don't know if it's true or not, but seemed like a reasonable number. Also, it was 37 rather than 30, so it seemed like it wasn't round. So they did some research behind it.
Yeah,
Um, but okay, so but coming back to it, I think where the market is right now, I think it's actually going in a very positive direction. I've seen so many of my clients who were struggling to land interviews, jobs, like graduating, finding the job, multiple offers, whatnot. And I think some of it has to do with the market. But the other part is because hiring managers can be selective and because layoffs have happened, essentially what they said is we don't want to take any risk with anyone. So we're going to put together all these set of requirements and we'd only that's their way of saying, I don't want to take risk. So that means for any role, you do need to be um, that low risk, high confidence, high excitement person. And that comes from positioning yourself as the obvious hire. So the way you do that is actually, we have this construct called angle of mastery. And so the idea being that don't just say that I'm a product manager with 10 years of experience in B2B. Okay, sounds great. But if you put a product management lens on, what are the kinds of problems that you have repeatedly solved for these companies that you've worked at, for which somebody else should hire you, right? Like have you been like one of my clients, their positioning is they just um remarkable at voice of the customer, and they've been able to truly understand, especially in a B2B setting, why is there a lack of usage in a platform, analyze data, talk to customers, understand the friction points, and eliminate that. Like eliminating friction is sort of their go-to, especially in complex B2B software products, which there's, so many of those. And so they're the obvious choice when somebody wants to hire for that. Now, they might have two or three angles and they might, position differently, but that makes it much more likely they are going to get an interview, they're going to actually get hired and whatnot, then cool, I am experienced B2B product manager with 10 years of experience because, there's 50 other people saying that. So I think it's the angle that you come with. And then that also means you're more selective in which jobs you actually go after, how much you put the effort on networking. I think that really counts for a lot at this point.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I've often struggled with that question myself of like, how do I position myself? Because in my career, I've worked for a handful of different companies. I've had various titles and different levels of different size companies.
Yeah.
And I've never been in the same industry twice. So I've always kind of
Yeah,
viewed myself as like kind of a generalist who could just hop in and like take this PM lens on whatever problems thrown at me and go tackle it. But as
totally.
you were talking, I did see kind of through lines to some of
Yeah.
the things that I did in those companies. So
Yeah.
yeah, you definitely got my wheels turning of how should I do that myself?
I'm going to use your phrase from earlier. It's you got to be a little creative.
Mm-hmm.
So the normal assumption going in is you have to define this based on some like standard things like, oh, industry. So I'm a fintech PM. Okay, you can, but just the other day, I was talking to a hiring manager, some VP at a major fintech company. You'll know the name if I said it out loud. And I was like, okay, this is what you're looking for. I have a client who's a really good fit, but they have no fintech experience, just upfront. And he's like, I don't care about fintech experience because I'm looking for someone to do this certain thing and lead this thing for a certain charter. And this resume you shared of that person, they're perfect fit. It's so far removed from like the depth of fintech in this platform that they really shouldn't care about that. And so I was like, perfect. That's, their through line worked, and you got to be a little creative in thinking about how you come up with the angle of mastery.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. So, but the advice you've given has been amazing. I know I got definitely some stuff out of it, and I know the PMs listening have as well. But if there are PMs, and I hope there's several who are listening and saying, I need some help with this. Like I feel like I could start making steps there, but I want to accelerate where I want to go quicker. How can they get in touch with you?
Two things. One is LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's the best way. Just reach out, shoot me a message, connect. We can always have a chat. And then you could also go to our website, intentionalproductmanager.com/apply is our book a call link. But I would suggest LinkedIn because, that way it's a direct connection with me. And yeah, that would
Awesome.
be the best way to do that.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'll definitely link your LinkedIn profile, the website, and your information in the show notes. So if you're interested in kind of accelerating your career or seeing how you can create more leverage to get to where you want to go, reach out to Shobhit. Go find his information in the show notes. And again, Shobhit, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Sean. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for another lesson in product management. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a rating and review to let us know how we're doing, how we can improve, and ideas for future episodes. Until the next lesson in product management, go out and kill it.